You've seen the headline by now. Millions of Americans. Quietly selling the house, packing only what fits, and moving into an RV full-time. And right now, just as quietly, Australians are doing the very same thing. Here's what nobody is telling you. This is not new. We cracked this in this country more than 100 years ago. We did it cheaper, we did it smarter, and we did it without a single power bill. I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. And it all leads back to one small wooden box, built in a dusty goldfields town in Western Australia in the 1890s, that kept food fresh for days in 40-degree heat with no electricity at all. I remember the first time I ever saw one. I was standing in a tin shed just outside Gulgong, in the central west of New South Wales, and an old bloke named Reg pulled a dusty sheet off it like it was treasure. And you can build a version of it this weekend, inside the ordinary home you're sitting in right now. No land, no tradesman, no special gear. So let me take you back to how I stumbled onto all of this, because I was the last person who should have. For most of my life, I did everything the modern, expensive way. I paid the bills that landed in the letterbox, and I never once asked whether I actually had to. I thought people who lived simply were people who had failed at something. That's the honest truth, and I'm not proud of it. Then a few years back, I started noticing the same story everywhere. Younger folks and older folks both, giving up the mortgage, giving up the rent, and shifting into a caravan or a bus or a converted van. At first I felt sorry for them. I thought, the poor devils, it's come to this. But the more of them I actually spoke to, the more something didn't add up. They weren't miserable. A lot of them were the happiest and calmest people I'd met in years. One couple I met near Forbes told me they'd knocked over $40,000 of debt in under 2 years, just by stepping off the grid and living small. And they said something to me that I have never forgotten. They said, "We didn't invent this, we just remembered it." That sentence rattled around in my head for weeks. We just remembered it. Remembered what? Because the way they talked, it was like there was a whole body of knowledge sitting right under our feet, and somehow my generation had been the ones to forget it. So I started asking questions, and that's when the old people started talking. Because here is the thing that stopped me cold. What looks brand new today, this idea of stripping life back and living mobile and self-reliant, is one of the oldest and most Australian things there is. We have been doing it since before there were power lines strung across this country at all. Think about the drovers. Think about the shearers moving shed to shed. Think about the swagman with everything he owned rolled into a single blanket over his shoulder. These weren't broken men. A good drover in the 1880s could earn more in a season than a clerk in the city earned in a year, and he did it carrying his entire household on a horse and in a tucker bag. And they lived well. That's the part that shocked me. Not scraping by, not suffering. They ate fresh, they slept warm, they kept clean, and they did it hundreds of miles from the nearest shop with no ice, no fridge, and no PowerPoint anywhere in sight. I used to think that was impossible. I genuinely did. I thought, you can't keep meat in the bush in summer, you can't keep butter, you can't keep milk. It'll spoil in a day. So how on earth did whole families of moving people eat well for months at a time? That question is the thread. Pull on it, and the whole hidden world comes undone. Because it turns out there was an entire toolkit of methods, worked out over generations, for living comfortably with almost nothing. And every single one of those methods still works today, in a caravan, in a van, or in a suburban kitchen when the power goes out. Nothing has changed about the physics. The only thing that changed is that we stopped being taught it. And the more I dug, the angrier I got. Because these skills didn't fade away by accident. Let me explain what I mean by that, because this is where it stopped being a nice bit of history and started being personal. When the electricity grid rolled out across regional Australia, mostly through the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, something quiet happened alongside it. The moment a house got connected, The old self-reliant methods were treated as embarrassing, backward, something poor people did. The new electric fridge wasn't just sold as a convenience, it was sold as proof you'd made it in life. And I understand why people jumped at it. I would have too. But look at what came with that deal. The moment your food safety, your cooling, your cooking, and your comfort all ran through a wire coming into your house, you handed a stranger the power to charge you for staying alive. And they have raised that charge every single year since. I pulled my own power bills from the last decade and lined them up on the kitchen table. What I paid to keep one fridge and one freezer running had roughly doubled in that time. Doubled. For the exact same job my grandmother did for nothing with a wet cloth and a breeze. That's when it clicked for me. The knowledge didn't just get forgotten, it got made to feel worthless. Right at the moment somebody worked out how to sell us the replacement on a monthly plan forever. Now here's where I have to be honest with you about my own stubbornness, because I didn't believe a word of it at first. When old Reg out at Gulgong first told me you could keep butter hard and meat sweet in the middle of summer with no ice, I nodded politely and thought the old fellow was having me on. I'd grown up being told that without refrigeration your food is a health risk waiting to happen. That's drilled into you. So I pushed back on him, and Reg didn't argue. He just told me to come back in 3 days. He said he'd have a leg of lamb sitting in his contraption the whole time, in the shed, in a Gulgong summer, and if it had turned he'd shout me lunch in town. If it hadn't, I had to sit down, shut up, and listen to him for an hour. I came back 3 days later fully expecting to be eating a free pub lunch. The lamb was perfect, cool to the touch, firm, not a thing wrong with it. And I stood there in that tin shed feeling like the ground had shifted under me, because everything I'd been told about what you absolutely needed electricity for had just been proven wrong by a wooden box and a bucket of water. So I sat down, and I shut up, and I listened. And what Regs told me over the next hour is the reason I make these videos at all. But before I give you the box itself, I need you to understand the principle underneath it, because the principle is the real treasure, and it shows up in a dozen different ways across old Australian bush life. The principle is evaporation. When water turns from a liquid into a vapor, it pulls heat out of whatever it's touching. You already know this in your own body. When you sweat and a breeze hits you, you feel cold, even on a hot day. That chill is heat being physically dragged out of your skin as the sweat evaporates. It's not magic. It's one of the most reliable forces in nature. Now, the old bush people didn't have the science words for it, but they understood it in their bones. They wrapped a butter dish in a wet cloth and stood it in the breezeway, and the butter stayed firm. They hung a canvas water bag off the front of the truck or the horse, and the water inside came out cooler than the air, because a little seeped through the canvas and evaporated in the wind and chilled the rest. Every drover carried one. That canvas water bag swinging off the bull bar is one of the most Australian images there is, and almost nobody today knows it was a working cooling device, not just a container. The CSIRO and university researchers have measured this properly in the years since. A well-built evaporative cooler in dry conditions can pull the temperature down by 10, 12, even 15 degrees below the surrounding air. Think about what that means. If it's a brutal 38-degree day outside, the inside of that box can be sitting around 24 or 25. That's the difference between food that spoils by lunchtime and food that keeps for days. And here's the part that made me laugh out loud when Reg explained it. The hotter and drier the day, the harder this thing works. The very conditions that kill your food fastest are the conditions where evaporation is strongest. It's like the method was designed by this country for this country. So that's the principle. Now stay with me, because I know exactly what a lot of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, that's lovely for the fellow with a van, an open road, and a dry paddock and a breeze. But I'm sitting in a unit, or a little brick house on a suburban block. I don't have acreage. I don't have a workshop. This has nothing to do with me. I want to talk directly to you for a minute, because you are exactly the person I made this for. Not the gray nomads. Not the off-grid crowd with the solar array and the composting toilet. You. In the ordinary home you already live in, with the power bill you're already sick of. Because every single thing I'm describing works inside a normal house, and most of it works better there, and I'll prove it to you right now with things you already own. Start with the wet cloth. This is the simplest version of the entire 100-year-old method, and it costs you nothing. Take a bottle of water, or a jug of milk, or your butter, and wrap it in a wet tea towel. Stand it in a dish with a little water so the bottom edge of the cloth stays wet and keeps drawing water up. Then put it somewhere with moving air. Near an open window, in a doorway, in front of a fan if you like. As the water climbs the cloth and evaporates into the moving air, it pulls the heat straight out of whatever's wrapped inside. I've done this on my own kitchen bench when a storm knocked our power out for a day and a half. And that little trick you just watched is only the first thread of a much bigger rope. If you want every one of these old methods laid out in plain steps, the whole collection does exactly that. Aussie Basics walks you through building the Gulgong safe method tonight, from things already in your kitchen, and setting up a pantry that stops your food and eggs spoiling before you use them. Deep Thrift shows you how to preserve a glut of eggs, vegetables, and meat with no freezer and no fancy gear, and how to keep the house warm for less. And the full system ties it all into one simple 30-day plan for renters and small units, with printable checklists you can stick on the fridge. Do not take my word for any of it. Tonight, wrap your butter or your milk in a wet tea towel, stand it in a dish of water near a cracked open window, and check it in the morning cool to the touch, for free, exactly like I said. This one is worth doing before the next heat wave hits, because that power bill is climbing whether you act or not. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Right now, let me finish this story, because the neighbors lost a fridge full of food that day. The neighbors lost a fridge full of food. I lost nothing, because the milk and the butter and the leftover meat sat wrapped in wet cloths near a cracked open window and stayed cool the entire time. My wife, who had rolled her eyes at me for years about all this old stuff, went very quiet that afternoon. Here's the second one, and it's for anyone who's ever had the power go out in a heat wave and lain awake sweating. Hang a wet sheet across an open window or an open doorway on the breezy side of the house. As the outside air passes through the damp sheet, the water evaporates, and the air coming through is cooled before it reaches you. The old Queenslanders did this on the sleep-out verandas for generations before air conditioning existed. It is the exact same principle as the box, just working on a room instead of a leg of lamb. And the third thing costs nothing but changes everything, and that's understanding thermal mass and airflow in a home you already have. A wet Hessian bag or a damp towel hung over a shaded window on the outside, kept wet through the hottest part of the day, will drop the temperature of the air coming through it noticeably. People paid thousands for air conditioners to solve a problem their great-grandparents solved, with a wet bag and an understanding of where the breeze came from. So please, get the idea out of your head that this is only for people on the road. It isn't. The van folks just rediscovered it first because they had no choice. You've got the same power to use it, tonight, sitting exactly where you are. But a wet cloth on the bench is the toddler version. Reg's box, the one that kept that lamb perfect for 3 days in a Gulgong summer, was the fully evolved machine, and that machine has a name and a birthplace and an inventor and a date. And this is the buried research I promised you at the start. It's called the Gulgong safe. Let me take you to where it was born, because the story is better than any invention story they teach in school. In 1892 and 1893, gold was struck out at Gulgong, in the harsh, dry goldfields of Western Australia, hundreds of kilometers inland from the coast. Thousands of men rushed out into some of the most punishing country on the continent, blazing heat, almost no water, and absolutely no way to keep food from rotting in a matter of hours. Now, the name most often attached to the invention is a contractor named Arthur Patrick McCormick. And the story goes that he noticed something simple. A wet bag left over a bottle kept the bottle cool. A wet surface in that dry desert wind stayed remarkably cold, because the air out there was so dry it sucked the moisture off and dragged the heat away with it. So he built a box around that idea. And what he built was so effective, and so cheap, and so perfectly suited to this country, that within a few short years it had spread right across Australia. By the early 1900s, the Coolgardie safe was in homes, on stations, and on the back of drovers' wagons from one side of the continent to the other. For decades before the electric fridge arrived, this was how a huge share of Australian families kept their food. It fed this nation. And then the grid came, and the fridge got sold as progress, and this brilliant piece of Australian design got shoved into the back of the shed and called junk. Which is exactly where I first saw one, under a dusty sheet, being guarded by an old man who knew better than the rest of us. So let me give it to you, the whole thing, because once you understand how simple it is, you'll never look at your power bill the same way again. You build a frame. It can be timber, it can be an old wire shelf unit, it can be a simple cupboard with the solid sides taken out. The key is that the sides are open, covered only with hessian, that's burlap, a coarse open weave cloth. The shelves inside are where your food goes. On the very top you sit a tray of water. A baking dish is perfect. Then you drape strips of hessian or old toweling so that the top edge sits in the water tray and the rest of the fabric hangs down over the open sides of the box, all the way down. That water in the top tray slowly wicks down through the hanging cloth by capillary action, the same way the wet edge of a paper towel climbs upward. The whole outer surface of the box stays permanently damp. Then you stand the whole thing where it catches a breeze, on a shaded veranda, in a doorway, in front of an open window. Now watch what happens. Air moves across the damp hessian. The water evaporates into that moving air, and as it evaporates it drags the heat out of the box, exactly like sweat off your skin. Inside, it stays cool and moist and shaded, and the food keeps. Traditionally, they stood each leg of the frame in a small dish of water too. Kerosene tins were the classic, partly to keep the cloth fed with water from below and partly to stop the ants marching up into the food. Every detail of it had been thought through by people who lived and died by whether it worked. And here is the number that matters. The one that proves this is not just nostalgia. Tested properly, a Coolgardie safe in dry conditions holds its inside temperature something like 10 to 15 degrees below the outside air. Steady, all day, for as long as there's water in the tray and air moving past it. No power, no gas, no moving parts, no monthly bill, just water, cloth, and the free wind that's blowing past your house right now for nothing. You can build one this weekend for the price of a few lengths of timber and a meter of hessian from the hardware store. Some people build them into a spare kitchen shelf. Van folks build slimline ones down the side of the van. And there are families in this country, right now, using a Coolgardie safe as their main food store for fresh vegetables, eggs, cheese and butter, and cutting their fridge use to almost nothing. Let that sink in. A piece of technology from the 1890s that we were taught to laugh at, quietly outperforming a machine that cost you hundreds of dollars a year to run at the one job that machine was built for. But I promised you this was more than a box, and it is. Because once you understand the principle, you start seeing the whole hidden toolkit that came with it, and you realize how much we handed away. The canvas water bag I mentioned, the one that hung off the front of every farm truck. Same principle. Cool water in the harshest heat, for free. The old meat safe with the fine gauze sides hung in the coolest, breeziest corner of the house. Same family of thinking. Keep the flies off, keep the air moving, keep it shaded. The way the old houses were built at all. The deep verandas that shaded the walls before the sun could ever heat them. The high ceilings that let the hot air rise away from you. The houses lifted up on stumps so the breeze could run underneath and cool the floor. Every one of those was a deliberate, clever answer to living comfortably in a hot country without paying anybody a cent to run a machine. And we bulldozed that wisdom and replaced it with sealed brick boxes that cook you alive the moment the air conditioner fails. That's the thing that really gets me. This wasn't primitive. This was sophisticated. Generations of trial and error, refined into methods so reliable they kept a whole nation fed and comfortable across a brutal climate. And it was buried not because it stopped working, but because there was no way to put a monthly charge on a breeze. I think about old Reg a lot. He passed a couple of years back, and the last proper conversation we had, he said something I want to pass on to you exactly as he said it to me. He said, "They didn't take these things off us. We handed them over, because they convinced us the new way made us better people. And the day we believed that was the day they had us paying forever." He was right. And the beautiful thing, the thing that made me want to tell you all of this, is that nobody can stop you taking it back. The knowledge never actually died. It just went quiet, kept alive by a handful of old bushies and station families and a few stubborn souls who never trusted the grid. And now it's yours, sitting in front of you, ready to use. So here's what I want you to feel as you switch this off. Not that you're going without, the opposite. You've just been handed back something that was quietly taken from you and sold back to you at a premium your whole adult life. That's not going backward, that's coming home. Because I reckon you're the same kind of person I turned into. The kind who's had a gutful of being charged more every year for things our grandparents did for free. The kind who suspects that plain, useful, common-sense knowledge got pushed aside, not because it stopped working, but because somebody worked out how to make you pay for the replacement. If that's you, then you already belong here. Now I want to hear from you, and I want you to actually do this, because I know most of you watch quietly and never say a word. Tell me one thing. Did your parents or your grandparents have a Coolgardie safe, or a meat safe, or a canvas water bag hanging off the truck? What do you remember about it? And tell me where in the country you're watching from, because I love seeing how far this reaches. Just put it down in the comments. It honestly makes my day to read them. And if you want to keep pulling these old methods back out of the shed with me, come along for the ride, because this is bigger than one video. This is a whole movement of us, quietly recovering the know-how they thought we'd forget. Next time, I'm going to show you how the old-timers kept a whole winter's worth of vegetables crisp and edible for months, with no fridge and no freezer at all, using nothing but sand, a wooden crate, and a spot in the ground you already have. Most people have never heard of it, and once you see it, you'll wonder how we ever let it slip away. I'll see you there. Go build that box, and prove it to yourself, the same way old Reg proved it to me. Before you go, let me tell you where this goes next. Inside the Bush Wisdom Circle, I walk you through the full Goldfields cooler build, the very box old Reg unveiled. If you get stuck, you ask me, and I answer you myself, no machine. You won't be doing it alone either. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime, one click.